Hello and welcome to Coming to Peace with the third trimester. Wherever you're at in your pregnancy, I want to invite you to realize that the way we do one thing is the way we do everything, and the way we treat our pregnancy is indicative of how, or shows how we will likely treat our birth. And so the work that you do in your pregnancy will prepare you for birth. And it's radically important that you learn during this process to be with yourself, be with your emotions, find presence rather than pushing down, stuffing, or moving away from any of the symptoms or emotions or ideas that you have. If you don't yet have the tools to process your emotions or come to peace with what's going on in your life, absolutely reach out to me. I'm happy to share and offer lots of resources around emotional and thought forms, processing ideas, crazy ideas, challenging ideas that might come your way. I want to talk a little bit about third trimester processing. I found that the transition from second trimester to third trimester was interesting and surprising. Many people talk about sort of first trimester being characterized by exhaustion, nausea. Second trimester is this sort of easy, graceful period where things aren't as challenging for some people. Some people still challenged with nausea and whatnot, and I've got a couple other podcasts around that you might want to listen to if that's you. Um, and then the third trimester, often characterized by exhaustion, sleeplessness, prodromal labor, sort of like moving in and out of labor sensations, and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of waiting. And so I wanted to share some of the experiences that I've been through and some of the challenges that I've come up with in this time, because I'm now definitely in my third trimester, and share that wisdom with you so that you can move through the experience of third trimester with more grace and allow yourself to process your way into a joygasmic birth and postpartum. So the first thing that I think that came up for me moving into third trimester was sleep became radically more challenging. Prior to that, I had been sleeping fairly well, but definitely with third trimester, the hips are starting to loosen, the pelvis is starting to loosen, the belly is that much bigger, and so moving into a space of, using every night, it's like, okay, head pillow, belly pillow, leg pillow, getting everything sorted and set up. That took a while for me to figure out that, oh, if I did that, it would help. But I also really struggled with the idea of sleeping in a separate space from my partner. So prior to that, we had been sleeping in the same bed, in the same bedroom. And moving into third trimester, I really found that even just being right next to him in bed brought an incredible amount of itchiness and sort of like this tossing and turning sensation into my body. And after a couple of weeks of that, which you don't have to wait a couple weeks, you can just try this tonight if this is something you're experiencing, I just moved into a different bed. I had a lot of resistance to setting up a bed in the living room, sort of like this sleeping on the couch. I was like, this is my bedroom. Like, I don't want to sleep on the couch, and you're already unconscious, so it's like not kind to wake you up to go sleep on the couch, but whatever we're doing right now isn't working. And there was a lot of sort of internal mental story around what it might be to have my partner sleep on the couch. The associations that I had with that all involved man in the doghouse, being in trouble, challenges in the marriage, this kind of thing. And it wasn't until I started to ask for help, started asking for the wisdom of the women around me who had also been pregnant, who were ahead of me in that pregnancy journey. And there was one woman in particular who was able to say to me, I have a fantastic marriage with my husband, and he's been sleeping on the couch since first trimester because I just need the space to be able to stretch out, move my body, do what I want to do, move how I want to move, and sort of claim the bed space as my own. And it was really incredible because as soon as I heard that from her, I went, oh, okay, that's fine. We can sleep in different beds, and that's totally fine. And we set up a space in the bedroom where I took the sort of the couch bed that's in the living room and moved it into the bedroom because I wanted to be in the same space with him. Did not want to be in the same space as the dog, because I still struggle with like living with a dog because I wasn't raised that way. Sometimes I struggle, often it's a pleasure. But yeah, I just created a separate nest space in the bedroom for me to sleep in, where if I was having trouble falling asleep, I could move into that space without feeling like I was completely separating from him and from family. And that helped a lot in terms of creating physical space where my body then felt more relaxed. And what I realized was actually my husband and I have not spent a tremendous amount of time together during the pregnancy. I would say he's been in his version of man nesting, aka like making money and making sure the household is taken care of and working on projects and nurturing himself during that time. And I've really deepened into circle of women and being in connection with them and what that looks like. And so we haven't been spending a lot of time together, but the time we have has been pretty sexy. I've been pursuing a pregnant sexy rather than a pregnancy. So being still really active in our sex lives means that my predominant association with him is of being in intimacy. And so even just laying next to him would sort of get me into this kind of horny space. There's a lot of blood flow going on in the pelvis during pregnancy. And so I realized after a couple of weeks of sort of sitting with this and being in frustration and sort of challenge around the experience of lying next to him and feeling really like agitated, I realized actually I was horny and he was very asleep and we'd already made love, and it didn't make sense to wake him up at midnight or 1 o'clock or whatever when I was still awake to make love again, knowing that he was going to wake up at 4 or 5 or 6 in the morning and I was going to get to sleep until later. So later I talked to him about it. He's like, you can do that if you want. And I was like, yeah, but I don't really want to make love with your like 1 a.m. half asleep self. Like I'd rather have your presence and your patience and your kindness and your attention from your awake self, when we make time for that the other time during the day. So then that opened up space for me to move into my own bed space or lie next to him and be in self-pleasure, and basically appropriately handling the needs and desires of my body for space or for intimacy and connection or for connection with pleasure. And I noticed that it was really actually the itchiness would I could handle really simply by actually just tuning into the pleasure in my body, and that by pushing that pleasure away or being like, no, that's not what's happening, or no, it's not okay to feel that, or I'm going to wake him up, or I'm too loud, or sort of all of these thoughts, that I was then able, if when I leaned into the pleasure, I was then able to actually just completely bypass that, or not bypass, but like transmute that itchy sensation into like full body sensation. I'm like, oh, like my skin is tingling. When I'm frustrated with that experience, it turns into itch. And when I embrace that sensation, it turns into like a lot of pleasure. So that was a really big insight that I had around sleep and around intimacy with partner and such things. And it really turned around when I started to ask my community of women around me, like, has this happened to you? Is this normal? And to really hear, like, yes, it is normal to have sleep challenges especially in third trimester. And I actually think this is the wisdom of our bodies tuning us in to go like, hey, it would be really disruptive for our bodies if we went from sleeping 8 hours a night in a really like easy way to all of a sudden being woken up every 1.5 to 2 hours in the middle of the night because we've got a small baby with a small stomach who wants to nurse. And so the challenges, sort of the intensity of the fragmentation of the sleep that happens in late pregnancy, is actually our bodies preparing us for that journey of early motherhood in a very, very wise way. And when I realized that, I was like, oh, so then it doesn't make sense for me to be upset about this. In fact, if anything, I'm going to be grateful for the fact that if I wake up to pee 5 times a night and one of those times I can't wake up, I can't go back to sleep, um, I have complete choice about what it is that I'm doing next. I can get up and pee and take care of my body without having a small baby who needs me in that moment, who wants to be close to me, who wants to nurse with me. I can um, I can get up and I can work on some of the projects that I'm doing. I can record my thoughts. I can journal. I can make art. I can go for a walk in the middle of the night if I want, although we'll talk about that a little bit later. But there were all sorts of different experiences that I could choose in this moment. And I go like, oh, actually, instead of feeling frustrated with my changes in my sleep, I'm going to feel grateful for how much freedom I still have right now, because I've already been a mom once, and I am very, very aware that as baby comes into our world, the sense of personal autonomy versus like caring for another being is going to shift in a radical way. And so just moving into celebrating that I have freedom to do whatever I want at late night is fine. It took me several weeks to move through this, but now that you've heard this insight and this understanding from me, you can make that shift today, tomorrow, the next day, or in a week or two, whatever it is, however long you need to take to decide, maybe I'll try not being upset about what's happening and just embracing it instead. And I really have found that this whole last trimester has really been in a big way about stepping into being in connection with presence, with what's happening exactly in this moment, with just being able to surrender to what is happening in the body. So that's a really big, those are sort of my insights around sleep. Let's see if there's another one. The pillows, the horniness, the separate space, surrendering. The other one is the recognition of sometimes like I just can't sleep, and that's okay. And in the past, I have, especially after the birth of my first son, because I was sleep deprived for many, many, many years, working single mom, etc. And caring for a small baby and working from home, so like very few breaks, doing it all, a lot of it myself, although I did have help along the way from my family and friends along the way for sure. But I was very, very sleep deprived, so for many years it was really easy for me to fall asleep, lie down, 2 minutes later, unconscious. And in this pregnancy, one of the things I encountered that I'd never really encountered before was this experience of lying in bed for an hour awake, kind of neutral, unable to fall asleep, or not falling asleep rather. And I know that some women really experience anxiety or circular thoughts or challenges like they're thinking about how they're fearful about birth, or they're thinking about things that need to be supported or changed in their lives. And I didn't really have those experiences in terms of anxiety, but it's really kind of a strange experience to be lying in bed and not thinking about much and just lying there and just focusing on breathing, and then getting up because I got to go pee again, and realizing an hour or two had passed and I was just kind of lying there waiting to fall asleep. And it took me again a couple of weeks to figure out that if I got to that place where I realized I wasn't going to fall asleep, didn't feel like there was sleep on the horizon. I'd maybe made love with my partner and he'd fallen asleep, and then here I am awake and moving into my next chunk of my evening, that I didn't actually have to stay in bed. I could actually get up. I could clean the kitchen if I wanted to, which is something that almost always needs to happen in my house. Um, I could I've been working on this, finishing up my memoir. My memoir, self-help erotica book, which is a fun evening journey for sure to engage in. I could engage in self-pleasure. I could have a bath if my belly surges have been getting stronger, and so getting into a magnesium soak tub bath, and sort of moving and being in that, like I like to call it pretend labor or labor preparation or labor practice, sort of being in the tub and flowing with the body and going like, how do I take this intense sensation or this strong surge and relax into it and really, really let go. So there was a shift that happened for me there from being in sort of waiting, inactive waiting. I'll lie here until I fall asleep, and then moving into, oh, I'm not falling asleep. So instead of lying here, let me do something that makes me feel productive, or let me do something that is relaxing to my body, or let me do something that is nourishing to myself. Again, this sense of freedom of time, like I can do anything I want with this time right now. That isn't necessarily going to be the case in 2 to 3 months or a month or however long it's going to be. So let me make use of this time and do the things that I need to do, whether that's sitting at 2 a.m. and sorting the baby clothes into piles that make sense and getting all the diapers lined up and or I made toothpaste recently, or making like the steam herbs, stuff like that, or working on the book, or whatever it might be, just sort of utilizing that time. And it took me several weeks to realize that when I had the impulse to do something different rather than lie there, that I could actually listen to that and follow that impulse and do the thing. That I didn't, just because it was late at night, did not mean that I had to be sleeping, did not mean that I had to be sleeping with my partner. There was a lot of challenge around the idea of desynchronizing our sleep, because primarily because my parents have lived with my dad going to sleep much later than my mom for many years, and that felt like a source of tension in their relationship. And so I didn't want to bring that tension in of having different bedtimes into my relationship dynamic. And the interesting thing is that when I talked to my partner about this experience and was like, hey, like, does it bug you if I'm going to bed at midnight and you're going to bed at 7? And if you're waking up at 4 and I'm waking up at 9, or whatever it might be, a lot of variation in there. And he goes like, no, I love having the mornings to myself. I go, oh, okay, interesting. Great. So he's actually totally fine with it. There's no negative associations for him there. He likes cuddling with me while we're sleeping, but he's not put out or challenged or feeling rejected or anything like that. And so it's really important, in any of these conversations, in any of these things, there's the dynamic between like what I or you in your situation are feeling, and sort of the stories we're telling ourselves, but then also the stories we're telling ourselves about what our partner's stories are, right? I was telling myself a story of like, if I'm not sleeping at the same time he is, he's going to be frustrated or angry or grumpy with me for being awake and the lights on and the being loud or whatever. And actually he just puts earplugs in and he's totally fine, or he doesn't and he just sleeps through it, right? So there's like layers of story that have been built up that cause this sort of experience of suffering, or the continuation to stay in that suffering, because there's a fear of some other consequence that might happen if I were to take the action that I feel inspired to do. And literally just having the conversations and working through like, why am I scared of this? What's happening? Like, what are the stories I'm telling myself? Has enabled me to sort of like pull those apart to the place where, last night, for example, I fell asleep at 6 p.m., woke up at 7, woke up at 8, woke up at 9. At 9, I couldn't go back to sleep, stayed up till 3, went back to sleep, woke up at 10, and I'm in the privileged space of not needing to go to a 9 to 5. And so this makes it a lot easier, but also, oh gosh, just like it's not the end of the world to show up tired to your work. It's not the end of the world to show up tired to your day. And in fact, with the baby coming, like, you're going to be doing more of that. And so learning to function tired, learning to function sort of like half awake or half asleep, is an important skill to master in that last trimester. So go ahead and do that and just come to peace with it. Yeah, if you are interested in learning more, there's also a really wonderful sleep app that actually my partner helped create, called Dreamwell. The Dreamwell app. It's available on Android and iOS, and they have a really incredible falling asleep track that utilizes sort of isochronic brainwave functions that I've found helpful for those days where I'm like, really just fall asleep, or I get to that place where I'm really tired, but I'm still having a hard time falling asleep. I'll put this track on, and that really helps with the literally taking the brain waves, right? Because we got to switch from sort of like alpha, beta, thinking, planning, doing, actioning brainwaves down into the deeper delta and theta brainwaves where sleep exists. And this is true of life and sleep, as well as true of labor. Later, we want to get down into those delta theta. So if you can have a tool that helps you entrain down, that helps you like slow your brain waves down and move into that, like the app, with the incredible audio tracks that are there, and the visualizations and the meditation, stuff like that, that can be really helpful. Also, if you're doing hypnobirthing or the Joygasmic birth preparation course, that kind of stuff, that have tracks that you can listen to, I often found that listening to sort of calm, relaxing voices, some nights it would work. I'm going to be honest, some nights it just didn't work. Some nights I found myself swearing at the hypnobirthing lady, being like, motherfucker, I am itchy and I do not want to hear your voice telling me to calm down, breathe through it. I'm not having a good time right now. And those nights I would just turn the tracks off, because I didn't want to build an association between the tracks I was going to use at birth and being really angry. or frustrated because I didn't feel like she was responding to my situation. So in those cases, sometimes a longer, like 3 to 5 hour or 8 hour, um, isochronic track that's bringing that brainwave entrainment down into the theta can be helpful to not aggravate sort of the voice and the thinking part. Sometimes I find the people talking is really, really helpful. And I haven't yet, but by the time the podcast goes live, I will have, I'll put together a list of some of my favorite sleep tracks so you can check them out and see which one works for you. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. And as always, there's more for you on the website and in our membership. And I look forward to connecting even deeper with you. Thank you so much.